The night crept in with a weight I recognized too well. 10 years to the hour since Lena vanished, and the silence in our house throbbed like a pulse. I had learned to survive it, feeding it excuses, patching it with half-truths. But anniversaries sharpened the edges of ghosts, and tonight the quiet pressed until I could hardly breathe. I climbed the attic ladder with hands that wouldn't stop trembling. The box was still there, tucked behind holiday lights and brittle photo albums. I had sworn I'd never open it again. For a decade, it sat like a coiled trap, daring me to lift the lid. I gave in. Inside, her wedding ring, cold and dull, as if it too had stopped believing in vows. A tarnished motel key wrapped in faded tissue. And the envelope. White paper, edges yellowed. My name in her handwriting. Only if you love me. I couldn't bring myself to tear it open. 10 years hadn't given me courage. They'd only buried me deeper in cowardice. Still, I needed to speak. Not to her, not to anyone who could answer back. Just to something that would hold my words without judgment. So I pressed record on an old handheld device, its red light burning in the dark. My name is Ethan Cole, I whispered, voice hoarse. And this is what silence has made of me. The words spilled uneven, half confession, half defense. Told the machine what I never told the police, what I never told her parents. How I lied about the night she left. How guilt became my shadow. When I paused, the attic seemed to breathe with me. But then a thought cut through. It was only a matter of time before someone else came asking for this story. Someone who wouldn't settle for silence. The attic recorder still blinked on my desk when I first saw him. Riley Shaw, grinning like a wolf dressed in denim. He wasn't police, not yet, but he carried the same hunger. His true crime podcast had turned nobodies into monsters overnight. And now he wanted me for his next season. You don't want the cops telling your story before you do, he said, sliding a microphone between us like an ultimatum. You want it raw, unfiltered. People deserve your side. I should have thrown him out. Instead, I let him record. Maybe it was the way he said your side, like there was still one worth saving. Maybe I was just tired of carrying silence on my back. So I confessed, but not to what they wanted. I told Riley about the alibi I faked, how I claimed I was home the night Lena disappeared, but really I was circling the city like a ghost, too afraid to follow her trail. I admitted I found the motel key and locked it away, like evidence of my cowardice. I didn't hurt her, I said. I failed her. Riley leaned closer. Failure doesn't leave bloodstains, Ethan, but your story drips. The mic caught every tremor in my voice, every crack in the armor I'd built for a decade. He called it authenticity. I knew it was just guilt leaking through the seams. When he left, the recorder still blinked red, waiting for me to finish what I hadn't said. My words were already out there, raw meat for strangers. But the attic box still held more than I dared admit, and my memory, my cursed shifting memory, wasn't finished with me. Tomorrow, I would return to the night itself, to the fight, the broken mug, the drop of blood I can never wash clean. That night has lived inside me like a broken film reel, splicing itself differently every time I press play. Riley's microphone may have captured my words, but the recorder upstairs catches the silences in between, the edits I make inside my head. It always begins with her eyes. Lena's eyes weren't glass. Glass reflects. Hers absorbed, drank in every lie, every hesitation. She had the envelope in her hand, the one I found in the box. She waved it like a detonator. If you love me, she said, you'll let me walk away. I told her walking away wasn't love, it was betrayal. She said staying wasn't love either. The mug went first. She threw it against the wall, and the ceramic screamed into shards across the hallway. I remember shouting. I don't know what words, only the sound of them tearing my throat. Then came the door, slamming so hard the frame rattled like bones. And the blood. A single drop on the tile dark against the grout. I knelt there with a rag, scrubbing until my knuckles split. I told myself it was hers from a cut, nothing more. But in memory, that drop grows larger, heavier, redder, until I can smell it in my dreams. 10 years later, I replay it, edit it, distort it. Sometimes she leaves laughing, sometimes crying, sometimes silent. But always she leaves. I pause the recorder, my hand shaking. Then I press it again. My truth doesn't sit still, I whisper. It shifts every time I reach for it. The machine clicks as if acknowledging the lie. Because now there's something else. A car pulled from a drained quarry, Lena's license plates clinging like teeth. Detective Nora Quinn will knock soon. And when she does, she won't care for my edited reels. She'll want the uncut version. The knock came just as I finished replaying the attic tape. Not tentative, not polite, measured. A rhythm of authority. When I opened the door, Detective Nora Quinn stood on my porch with rain still clinging to her coat. She wasn't new. I'd seen her once, years ago, when the search dogs gave up and the neighbors gave in. But now her eyes carried fresh certainty, like she'd been waiting for the water to lower all along. They drained the quarry this week, she said without introduction. Workers found a vehicle. Her pause wasn't for effect, it was for me to watch how I swallowed. Your wife's car. The world tilted. I gripped the frame to keep from falling. Deniers and the lake finally gave something back. She laid photographs on the table. Rusted metal, plates still legible. Inside, seats collapsed around strands of hair that once carried Lena's scent. A dark smear on the dashboard, swabbed and bagged. It's not yours, Nora said. Which leaves us with a question. I wanted to believe questions meant possibilities, but her tone told me otherwise. Time hadn't softened her. It had honed her. She studied me like I was a story she already knew, waiting only for me to recite the missing paragraphs. Mr. Cole, time preserves some things, she said. Evidence, memory, lies. They don't vanish as easily as people do. Her gaze lingered on my hands, steady now, though inside they shook. I managed only. I told everything I know. Her silence said she'd heard that before. When she finally left, the photograph stayed burned into me. Car unearthed, hair without a body, a smear that wasn't mine. Proof without answers. But proof has gravity, and soon it would pull others into its orbit. Someone else knew more than I did. Someone had been watching that night, and the first shadow to emerge would come from across the hall. Detective Quinn had barely left when another knock rattled the evening. Softer this time, hesitant. When I opened the door, Mara Lewis stood there, the neighbor who had lived across the hall the night Lena vanished. 10 years of polite nods and borrowed sugar, nothing more. Her face was pale, eyes ringed with the kind of exhaustion no makeup hides. I need to tell you something, she said, wringing her hands. I should have told it back then. We sat at my kitchen table. The air between us smelled faintly of dust and rain, like a confession buried too long. There was a man here that night, she whispered. Not you, someone else. The words lodged in me like shrapnel. Tall, careful, she continued. Moved like he belonged. Expensive shoes, polished. He went straight to your door. I heard Lena open it, heard her voice. I didn't want to be involved, so I stayed quiet. But I can't sleep anymore, not with everything surfacing again. My chest tightened. 10 years of silence, and now this. Another shadow written into the story of that night. You're sure it wasn't me? I asked, though I already knew the answer. She gave me a look, pity mixed with fear. You weren't the one she let in. Her words cracked something open inside me. I tried to summon the memory, but all I could hear was Lena's voice echoing from the hallway. If you love me, you'll let me go. I don't remember shoes. I don't remember anyone but her. Yet Mara's eyes told me she had carried this truth like a stone in her chest for a decade. When she left, the silence grew heavier, thicker. Now there was another man in the room with me. Unnamed, faceless, but undeniably real. I climbed back into the attic, searching the box again. Something must be there, something I missed. Dust choked the air, and my fingers brushed against a seam in the boards. A hidden crawl space inside, letters bound in twine. My wife's handwriting, but not signed as Lena. The crawl space smelled of rot and dust, air that hadn't been disturbed in years. My flashlight beam quivered across the beams until it landed on a bundle bound in twine, tucked deep where no casual search would ever reach. I pulled it out, fingers trembling. Letters, dozens of them. All signed the same name, Alina Hale, not Lena Cole, not my wife. The name was both alien and intimate, like discovering a scar beneath a familiar touch. I unfolded the first page, the paper thin and brittle as dried skin. Dear Alina, it began, written to herself. The words spiraled across the page, journal entries dressed as letters. She wrote of a father who controlled her breath, timing her movements like drills in a private army. Of a boyfriend who once traced her wrist tenderly, then closed his fingers until the tenderness became a leash. She had learned young that love and captivity could wear the same mask. In one entry, she confessed a trick. Vanish first. If you disappear before they close the door, you are free, not trapped. My throat tightened as I flipped through more. She called me kind, patient, but still a leash, a gentler tether, one I wanted to believe in. The words cut me deeper than any accusation. Our marriage, in her handwriting, was described as a leash I agreed to wear as long as he never pulled. I sank against the beams. Letters spread around me like evidence of a crime I hadn't known I was part of. My wife had lived as someone else, survived as someone else, and maybe vanished to become her true self again. But not every letter spoke of leaving. Some mentioned a visitor, a man. No name, just hints. A laugh too loud in the hallway, shoes that glinted under dim light. The attic seemed smaller, air choking me. Mara's story of the tall man clicked into place with the fragments Alina, left behind. I gathered the letters back into the bundle, my pulse racing. Whoever this man was, he hadn't just brushed against our lives. He had stepped inside, and now his name was coming back to me. His name returned to me with the force of a tide. Gabriel Reed. The letters had whispered him only as the visitor, but the pieces slid into place once Detective Quinn brought his file. A charming relapse from Lena's past, a rehab companion whose smile could talk people into second chances, or first mistakes. He'd been seen around the city the same week she vanished, then evaporated just as suddenly. The expensive shoes? Nora asked, sliding photos across the table. Italian leather, black polish, the kind of footwear that announced arrival. Stared. Mara's memory wasn't wrong. Triangles are messy, Nora added, her voice flat. Someone always gets cut. I almost laughed at the clinical way she said it. To her, it was geometry. To me, it was blood and bone. But it was Riley Shaw who twisted the knife. His podcast had already released my half-confession. Now he wanted headlines. The husband, the wife, the other man, he teased. It sells itself, Ethan. I remembered Gabriel's laugh, how it carried into a room before he entered it. He had looked at me once with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. So you're the husband, he'd said, like it was both title and insult. Then he turned to her, softened, and called her my Alina. Not Lena, not wife, my Alina. It was a claim, casual yet possessive, and I had ignored it then. I can't ignore it now. Quinn leaned in. We can't find him. No address, no paper trail after that week. He's as missing as your wife. The irony curdled in my stomach. Lena vanished. Gabriel vanished, and I was the only one left, the axis of their disappearance. Maybe he took her, I said, though my voice cracked with doubt. Or maybe, Quinn replied, she took him. Her words echoed long after she left, heavy as the unopened envelope in the attic. That night, unable to sleep, I turned back to my recorder. My voice shook as I tried to explain, to myself as much as anyone listening, how memory warps around absence. But before I could finish, my phone buzzed, a voicemail from a number long defunct. A whisper bled through the static. He thinks love is ownership. Tell him I'm not a thing. Riley Shaw didn't waste a second. By dawn, his newest episode was live. The Vanishing of Lena Cole. The Husband Speaks. Only it wasn't just my voice. He had found something else. A voicemail, 10 years old, dug from the husk of a dead phone account. Lena's voice, hushed and urgent, poured through the speakers. He thinks love is ownership. Tell him I'm not a thing. The words froze me in place. Ownership. A thing. Who was he? Gabriel? Me? Both? The podcast ignited like gasoline. My inbox filled with strangers' verdicts. Armchair jurors convicting me with hashtags. Self-appointed detectives combing through our marriage as if it were a puzzle box. Some called me a murderer, others a coward, but none called me innocent. Riley thrived on the storm. He emailed me clips of listener reactions, cries, anger, theories whispered in dark kitchens across the country. This is bigger than you, Ethan, he wrote. This is a national conversation now, but I wasn't a conversation. I was a man drowning in echoes. At night, I turned back to my recorder. The blinking red eye had become my only companion, my confessional. I loved you, I said into the static. Maybe too tightly, maybe not enough, but I didn't own you. My voice shook. The recorder caught it, merciless. Then something strange happened. I started speaking to it as if it were her. I called it Lena. I begged it for answers. I accused it of lying. I apologized until my throat ached. Tell me what I missed, I whispered. Tell me why you left. The device gave me nothing, but in the silence I heard my own revisions. I caught myself rephrasing the fight, softening my anger, editing her words, gaslighting the past, reshaping it until I sounded better, less guilty. The truth was slipping further away the more I tried to hold it. When I finally shut the recorder off, the house seemed to hum with judgment. And I knew judgment in its official form was coming. Because the next knock wouldn't be from a neighbor or a podcaster. It would be from the law. The house smelled of melted wax and stale coffee. I hadn't slept in days, and the candles were the only light I trusted. Electric bulbs made everything feel too sharp, too exposed. That's when the district attorney's assistant arrived. Michael Trent, pressed suit, careful tone, the kind of man who could sell ruin as mercy. We're not chasing a murder charge, he said, placing a folder between us. But obstruction? Withholding evidence? Moving that vehicle? That's enough to bury you. The photographs spilled out. Lena's car, rusted open like a carcass, hair sealed in plastic bags, the smear across the dash. Each image was a blade laid neatly on the table. You want me to sign away my life? I asked, voice frayed. Trent steepled his hands. I'm offering you a door. Plead to obstruction, serve reduced time, avoid the spectacle of a trial you will not win. The press already has you tried and convicted. This is your last clean exit. I wanted to argue, but truth had rotted too long in my hands. The motel key, the attic letters, the memory edits. I had built a house of lies and lived in it for a decade. Maybe this was the bill coming due. Across the room, Detective Quinn leaned against the wall, watching me like a hawk. She didn't speak, but her eyes narrowed at every pause, searching for the flicker, the slip that might reveal what else I carried. I didn't kill her, I said, more to myself than to them. That's not what you're signing for, Trent replied smoothly. This is about the cover-up, not the corpse. My hand shook as I reached for the pen. The candlelight wavered, throwing shadows across the page like prison bars. I told myself I wasn't paying for love, only for the lies. But I couldn't escape the image of Lena, Alina, writing her secret letters, practicing the art of disappearance. Had I been her warden all along, or just another accomplice in her escape? The signature bled onto the paper. Final, binding. When they left, the house sank into silence again. But not peace, because word was spreading. Someone who looked like Lena had surfaced in a hospital far from here, and she no longer answered to the name I knew. News doesn't travel, it detonates. The call came from Nora Quinn herself, voice clipped, unreadable. A hospital on the coast logged an intake, she said. Female, late 30s, burn scars. Signed in as Alina Hale. DNA from her brush matched the hair in the car. For a moment I couldn't breathe. 10 years of grief, guilt, and suspicion collapsed into a single word. Alive, but not Lena, not anymore. I drove through the night, heart pounding with every mile, until the hospital rose out of the fog like a pale ship. The corridors smelled of antiseptic and salt air. Nurses spoke her name, Alina Hale, like it had always belonged to her. Through a glass panel I saw her. My wife, my ghost, my stranger. Her face was mapped with scars, the kind fire leaves behind when it chooses who survives. She sat upright, chin lifted, as though daring the world to pity her. She would not see me. A social worker intercepted me at the door. She asked not to be visited. She says she's afraid of the story you tell about her. Her words struck deeper than the scars ever could. I had rehearsed a decade of apologies, a decade of pleas. None of them mattered. She wasn't mine to apologize to anymore. Later, I managed to pass a note through a nurse. Just 5 words. I never stopped loving you. The reply came the next morning, unsigned but unmistakable. Love is not ownership. The fire took my face, but it gave me choices. I choose not to return. I sat outside the hospital until the sun bled into the sea, recorder in my pocket, whispering fragments into its patient ear. My voice cracked against the tide, begging for a version of the past that would hold. But the ocean doesn't return what it swallows. And as I drove away, word reached me that the quarry had given up something else, something heavier than a car, something wrapped in chains. The call came at dawn. Another dredging at the quarry, another offering pulled from the water's throat. This time not metal, not rust, but canvas. A weighted duffel, bloated, torn. Inside, bones, clothing, the remnants of Gabriel Reed. Detective Quinn's voice was clinical as she walked me through it, but her eyes never left my face. The fracture to the skull matches a fall. Not a weapon. Self-defense, maybe. Survival, more likely. I tried to picture it, Lena or Alina standing at the edge, Gabriel reaching too far, too fast. Gravity doing what anger didn't need to finish. But self-defense is a shape that looks different depending on where you stand. To the law, it's survival. To the public, it's a narrative. To me, it was the silence she wrapped me in afterward, because the truth surfaced alongside those bones. In the envelope she left for me, the one I never opened until now, her handwriting shook across the page. He wouldn't stop. I pushed, he fell, I ran. Please, if you love me, finish the vanishing, that was her plea. Not to save her, not to absolve her, to erase her, and I did. I moved the car. I hid the key. I let the world suspect me because it was easier than exposing her. For 10 years, I carried the weight she shouldered for only a night. Looking at Gabriel's remains, I felt no triumph, no relief, only the ache of choices that had bound us tighter than any vow. We were accomplices in silence, partners in disappearance. Nora closed the file and studied me. This isn't about guilt anymore, Ethan. It's about what you'll admit out loud. Her words lingered long after she left. I returned to my recorder, pressed the button, and spoke into the void. I didn't kill him, I said. But I killed the truth. The red light blinked back at me, patient, waiting. 'Cause the final story still had to be told. Not to the police, not to Riley, not even to her, but to the world. The courtroom was colder than I expected. Marble floors, polished benches, a silence sharper than any gavel. Bargains were laid out like merchandise, each charge weighed, priced, and discounted. I took obstruction and fraud. Lena, Alina, accepted evidence tampering. No murder charges, no trial of shadows and whispers. Just paperwork and signatures. The quiet compromise of two people who had already spent a decade on trial in their own heads. Our lawyers framed it as mercy. Nora Quinn called it closure. Riley Shaw called it anticlimax on his podcast, though he still sold it as a story of survival and deceit. For me, it was neither mercy nor closure. It was simply the bill for the lies we both chose to live under. When the judge asked if I understood the plea, I nodded. But what I understood was something else entirely. The sweetness of marriage had dissolved long ago, like sugar in black coffee. All that remained was the bitterness. The residue of love turned into duty, then into silence. Afterward, we didn't look at each other. Not in the courtroom, not outside. She left under the name Alina Hale, her scars covered, her eyes forward. I left as Ethan Cole, stripped bare of the word husband. The door between us was not slammed. It was simply left open, and we walked through opposite sides of it. That night, I pressed record one last time. My voice was steadier than I expected. Love is not a leash, I said. It is a door, and sometimes the only way to love is to open it, even if the truth walks out first. I ended the tape, slid it into the same box where everything began. The ring, the key, the envelope now smudged by time. The attic swallowed the sound of the lid closing. For the first time in 10 years, the silence felt earned.